The first time I suspected something was wrong at Metropolitan General Hospital was during the routine safety audit in the surgical wing. As chief of patient safety, I developed a habit of doing these walkthroughs personally, not trusting the sanitized reports that crossed my desk. Dr. Mitchell, a nurse, called out, hurrying to catch up with me. "There's something you should see in OR3. I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell, and for the past 8 years, I've dedicated my life to keeping patients safe at one of Boston's largest hospitals. My colleagues often joke that I can spot a safety violation from across the building. They're not entirely wrong. After 15 years in hospital administration and a PhD in healthcare quality and patient safety, certain things just jump out at you. The issue in OR3 turned out to be a malfunctioning air handling system, something that should have been flagged weeks ago in the maintenance reports. But like many other problems I've been finding lately, it had somehow slipped through the cracks. How long has this been going on? I asked the nurse, already pulling out my tablet to document the violation. At least 3 weeks, she said quietly, glancing over her shoulder. We've reported it multiple times, but nothing had been done. It was becoming a familiar pattern, one that had started shortly after Richard Harrison took over as hospital director 6 months ago. I'd noticed the changes immediately, subtle at first, then increasingly obvious. Maintenance requests delayed, safety protocols streamlined, staff training sessions shortened, all in the name of efficiency and cost-cutting. "I'll take care of it," I assured the nurse, adding the violation to my growing list. "And thank you for bringing it to my attention." Back in my office, I pulled up the maintenance records. The air handling system issue had indeed been reported, multiple times. But each report had been marked as non-critical and pushed back in the queue. It was the same story with dozens of other safety issues I'd documented over the past few months. A knock at my door interrupted my review. Dr. Jessica Torres, head of surgery, stood in the doorway, her expression grim. "Sarah, we need to talk about what happened in OR7 yesterday." My stomach tightened. I'd been waiting for this conversation since receiving the incident report this morning. A patient had developed a post-operative infection, the third such case in 2 months. The new sterilization protocols? I asked if I already knew the answer. Jessica nodded, closing the door behind her. "They're not working, Sarah. The shortened cycle times, the reduced chemical concentrations. We're seeing contamination rates we haven't had in years." I know. I pulled up the statistics on my computer, showing her the trend lines I've been tracking. Infection rates are up 47% since the new protocols were implemented. I submitted 3 reports to Harrison about it. "Let me guess. He said it was within acceptable parameters?" I smiled grimly. His exact words were well within industry standards. But he's using outdated benchmarks. The current safety standards are much stricter. What are we going to do about it? I'm preparing a comprehensive report for the next board meeting. Every incident, every violation, every cost-cutting measure that's compromised patient safety. It'll be hard to ignore the numbers. Jessica leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Be careful, Sarah." Harrison has the board wrapped around his finger. All they see are the cost savings and efficiency metrics. She wasn't wrong. Since taking over, Harrison had cut operating costs by 15%, a feat that had earned him glowing praise from the hospital board. What they didn't see were the corners being cut to achieve those savings. After Jessica left, I spent hours compiling data for my report. The patterns were clear and disturbing. Increased infection rates, longer recovery times, more post-operative complications, all coinciding with Harrison's efficiency improvements. But I needed more than just statistics. I needed concrete evidence that would force the board to act. Over the next week, I dug deeper into the hospital's records. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Harrison wasn't just cutting corners, he was systematically dismantling safety protocols that had taken years to build. The sterilization issues were just the tip of the iceberg. Maintenance schedules had been stretched dangerously thin. Staff training hours had been slashed. Quality control checks had been reduced to the bare minimum required by law, and sometimes not even that. I documented everything meticulously, building a case that no one could ignore. But Harrison wasn't stupid. He must have noticed my investigations, my detailed questions, my careful documentation of every violation. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. It was late evening, and I was reviewing staff rotation schedules when Harrison burst into my office, his face flushed with anger. What the hell is this? He slammed a document onto my desk, a copy of the preliminary report I've been preparing for the board. That, I said calmly, is a comprehensive analysis of patient safety metrics since your new protocols were implemented. This is garbage, he spat. Cherry-picked data designed to undermine my authority. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked to make this hospital efficient? Efficient at what cost? I stood up, meeting his glare. The infection rates in OR7 alone are well within acceptable parameters. He cut me off. You and your obsession with gold standard protocols are costing this hospital millions. Do you know how much money we've saved with the new sterilization procedures? Do you know how many patients have developed infections because of those procedures? His face darkened. Watch yourself, Dr. Mitchell. Your position here isn't as secure as you think. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. The board meeting is in 2 days. If you present this report, if you try to undermine everything we've accomplished, everything you've accomplished, I corrected him. And what exactly is that? Cutting costs by compromising patient safety, trading people's lives for profit margins? Harrison's smile was cold. You really don't get it, do you? This is a business, Sarah. A business that was hemorrhaging money before I took over. Sometimes difficult decisions have to be made. Not with people's lives. He straightened, adjusting his tie. I'm giving you a chance here. Withdraw the report. Get on board with the program. Otherwise what? You'll fire me for doing my job. For protecting patients. For being unable to adapt to necessary changes. For refusing to embrace modern healthcare management practices. For being, quite frankly, obsolete. I looked at him for a long moment, seeing him clearly for the first time. He wasn't evil. Not really. He was just a man who had lost sight of what healthcare was supposed to be about. The report stays, I said quietly. The board needs to know the truth. Then you leave me no choice. He pulled an envelope from his jacket and dropped it on my desk. Your services are no longer required at Metropolitan General. I opened the envelope. Termination papers, effective immediately. The reasons listed were vague enough to sound plausible. Failure to adapt to organizational changes, resistance to efficiency improvements, insubordination. Your XCSSIV safety PROTOCOLs are costing US money, he shouted, his composure finally cracking. We can't afford your outdated idealism anymore. I looked at the papers, then back at him, feeling strangely calm. You know what we really can't afford, Richard? The lawsuits that will come when people start dying from preventable infections. The investigations that will follow when someone finally looks closely at what you've been doing. Get out, he snarled. Security will escort you to clear your office. I stood slowly, gathering my personal tablet, my own device, not the hospital-issued one. Of course. But Richard? You might want to postpone that board meeting tomorrow. Why's that? I smiled, thinking of the detailed records I'd been compiling, the evidence I gathered, the witnesses I prepared. Because the medical board will be very interested in what I have to show them. His face paled slightly. You wouldn't dare. Watch me. I walked to the door, then turned back. You know what the funny thing is? All those safety protocols you called excessive. They weren't just protecting patients. They were protecting you too. As security escorted me out of the building, I could feel Harrison watching from his office window. He thought he'd won, thought he'd silenced another troublesome idealist who didn't understand the realities of modern healthcare. But he'd forgotten something crucial about patient safety professionals. We document everything. And tomorrow, those documents would tell a story that not even the hospital board could ignore. In my car, I pulled out my phone and made 3 calls. The first was to my lawyer, confirming our meeting first thing in the morning. The second was to Dr. Torres, who had been quietly gathering her own evidence from the surgical department. The third call was to my old colleague at the State Medical Board, the one who had been waiting for months for concrete evidence of safety violations at Metropolitan General. It's time, I told her. I have everything you need. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. Harrison thought you fired another naive idealist who cared too much about safety protocols. Instead, he just armed the one person who could expose everything he'd been trying to hide. Sometimes being too careful is exactly what the situation requires. The night after my termination, I sat in my home office surrounded by 8 years' worth of meticulously maintained records. My laptop displayed a secure cloud drive containing thousands of documents, incident reports, safety violations, maintenance logs, and staff complaints. Harrison had no idea that I'd been building this archive since the day he started changing protocols. My phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Torres. 3 more post-op infections reported today. Harrison's trying to classify them as unrelated incidents. I added this information to my growing file, remembering the conversation I'd had with Jessica Torres 4 months ago when we first noticed the spike in infection rates. Document everything, I told her then. Every infection, every complication, every deviation from standard protocols. And make copies. Lots of copies. She had done exactly that, as had dozens of other healthcare professionals throughout Metropolitan General. They'd seen what was happening under Harrison's leadership, and they trusted me enough to share their concerns and their evidence. At 7 a.m., I met with my lawyer, David Cohen, in his downtown Boston office. He'd already reviewed most of my documentation, but the new files from the past week made him raise his eyebrows. "This is more serious than we thought," he said, studying the infection rate charts. "These numbers, if these had been reported properly to the medical board." "They were reported," I corrected him. "Harrison just found ways to classify them differently. Split them into separate categories, spread them across departments so the pattern wouldn't be obvious." David nodded, making notes. "Deliberate misclassification of adverse events. That's a serious violation of reporting requirements." He looked up at me. "You know they'll try to discredit you, paint you as a disgruntled former employee." I smiled, pulling out another file. "That's why I have this. Every email, every memo where I raised concerns about the safety protocols. Every response where Harrison dismissed those concerns. And most importantly, I handed him a USB drive, recorded conversations from staff meetings where he explicitly ordered supervisors to implement these dangerous policies." "You recorded the meetings?" "Massachusetts is a one-party consent state," I reminded him. "And as chief of patient safety, documenting safety-related discussions was part of my job description." David let out a low whistle. "Harrison really didn't know who he was dealing with, did he?" "No, he didn't. He'd seen me as another bureaucratic obstacle, someone too focused on rules and regulations to understand the bigger picture of hospital management. What he hadn't realized was that patient safety professionals are trained to see the biggest picture of all, the human cost of cutting corners." At 9 a.m., I met with Dr. Catherine Sullivan from the State Medical Board. I'd known Catherine for 15 years, since our residency days. She'd gone into medical regulation while I focused on hospital safety, but we'd stayed in touch, sharing concerns about the increasing pressure on hospitals to prioritize profits over patient care. "My God, Sarah," she said, paging through my reports. "The sterilization protocols alone. How did he think he could get away with this?" "Because he almost did," I admitted. "He was smart about it, never making changes that would obviously violate regulations, just small adjustments, each one seemingly insignificant on its own. But in combination, they created a perfect storm. Reduced sterilization times, diluted cleaning solutions, shortened inspection protocols, all while maintaining just enough documentation to seem compliant." Catherine's face hardened as she read the infection statistics. 3 deaths from post-operative infections in the past month alone. And these were classified as complications due to pre-existing conditions, I quoted bitterly. Harrison found a way to blame every incident on something other than his cost-cutting measures. She set down the reports and looked at me seriously. "You know what will happen when we open a formal investigation? The hospital's reputation will suffer," I finished. "I know. I've worked there for 8 years, Catherine. I care about Metropolitan General, but I care more about the patients who trust us with their lives." She nodded slowly. "The medical board meets at 2 p.m. I want you there to present this evidence personally." As I left her office, my phone buzzed again. A message from Tom Parker, head of hospital maintenance. "Harrison's in the maintenance office, ordering us to update the service logs. What do you need me to do?" I smiled grimly. Even now, Harrison was trying to cover his tracks. "Don't interfere," I texted back. "But document everything he changes. Take pictures of the original logs first." The next few hours were a blur of preparation. I met with Dr. Torres and other department heads who had agreed to testify about the safety violations. Each brought their own documentation, their own stories of how Harrison's policies had endangered patients. Maria Gonzalez, head surgical nurse, had kept a personal log of every infection that could be traced to the new sterilization protocols. Dr. James Wu from emergency medicine had documented how reduced maintenance on critical equipment had led to failures during crucial procedures. At 1:30 p.m., we gathered in the medical board's waiting room. Harrison wasn't there yet. He probably thought he had at least another day before I could organize any kind of response to my termination. Dr. Mitchell, a board assistant, appeared. "We're ready for you." I stood gathering my materials. Dr. Torrey squeezed my arm supportively. "Given health, Sarah." Inside the boardroom, Catherine was already seated with the other board members. Their faces were serious as I began setting up my presentation. At 1:45, the door burst open. Harrison strode in, his face flushed. "What is the meaning of this? I wasn't notified of any board hearing." "Mr. Harrison," Catherine said coolly, "how fortunate you could join us. We were just about to review some concerning evidence about safety protocols at Metropolitan General." He turned to me, his expression murderous. "You had no right." "Actually," I interrupted calmly, "as Chief of Patient Safety, I had every right and responsibility to report safety violations to the proper authorities. Your termination of my employment doesn't change that obligation. These are internal hospital matters. 3 deaths from preventable infections in the past month alone." I cut in. "Are those internal matters too?" The board chairman leaned forward. "Mr. Harrison, please take a seat. Dr. Mitchell has brought some very serious allegations to our attention." Harrison sat, his face tight with controlled rage. I could almost see him calculating, planning how to discredit me, how to explain away the evidence. But as my presentation began, as I methodically laid out the documentation of every violation, every covered-up incident, every dangerous policy change, I watched his confidence begin to crumble. The infection rate charts were damning enough, but when I played the recorded meetings where he explicitly ordered staff to implement dangerous protocols, when I showed the maintenance logs documenting systematic neglect of critical equipment, when I presented testimony from department heads about specific incidents that have been covered up. "This is a coordinated attack," Harrison tried to interrupt. "Disgruntled employees trying to." "These are sworn statements," Catherine cut him off, "from every department head at Metropolitan General." "Are you suggesting they're all lying?" I continued my presentation, showing how Harrison had manipulated reporting categories to hide adverse events, how he pressured staff to minimize safety concerns, how he created a culture of fear that discouraged incident reporting. The final blow came when I presented the financial data, proving that the cost savings Harrison had achieved came directly from compromising safety measures. The choice, I concluded, was between patient safety and profit margins. Mr. Harrison made his choice clear. Now you have to make yours. The room was silent as I finished. Harrison sat frozen, his career crumbling before his eyes. The board members exchanged glances, their expressions grave. Catherine spoke first. "Mr. Harrison, do you have any response to these allegations?" He straightened his tie, attempting to recover his composure. These protocols were all within acceptable parameters. "According to whose standards?" I interrupted, pulling up another document. "Because according to current medical board regulations, which I've highlighted here, virtually every protocol change you implemented violated safety requirements. The hospital was losing money, and now it may lose its accreditation," the board chairman said quietly. "These violations, the scope of them." Harrison's face went pale. Loss of accreditation would be a death sentence for Metropolitan General. "Unless," I said carefully, "immediate corrective action is taken. I've prepared a comprehensive plan to restore proper safety protocols along with a monitoring system to ensure compliance." The board members looked at me with interest. Harrison looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. "You planned this," he said softly. "All of it." "No, Richard." I corrected him. "You planned this the moment you decided that profit margins were more important than patient lives. I just documented it." The next 2 hours were intense. The board reviewed every piece of evidence, questioned every witness, examined every document. Harrison's attempts to defend his actions grew increasingly desperate as the weight of evidence mounted. By 5 p.m., the board had reached its decision. Harrison was suspended pending a full investigation. Metropolitan General would be placed under direct board supervision until proper safety protocols were restored, and I was asked to oversee that restoration. As we left the boardroom, Harrison stopped me. "You've destroyed everything I built," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "No," I replied quietly. "I protected what generations of healthcare professionals built. A system where patient safety comes first. You tried to destroy that. I just wouldn't let you." Walking out of the building, I checked my phone. Messages were pouring in from hospital staff who had heard about the board's decision. Relief, gratitude, and hope filled their words. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, rebuilding trust, restoring protocols, repairing the damage Harrison had done. But for now, I felt a deep satisfaction. Sometimes being too careful means being exactly careful enough. The morning after the medical board hearing, I walked back into Metropolitan General not as a disgraced former employee, but as the board-appointed safety compliance director. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, especially not on the hospital board members who had supported Harrison's efficiency measures. Dr. Mitchell, board chairman William Douglas greeted me stiffly in the main conference room. "We've reviewed the medical board's requirements for reinstatement of full accreditation. And I kept my voice neutral, though I could see from their faces that the reality of the situation had finally sunk in. "The costs of implementing these safety protocols," he began, "are significantly less than the cost of losing accreditation," I finished, "or the lawsuits that would follow if the public learned about the compromised safety standards." The room fell silent. These were business people used to thinking in terms of profits and losses. Now they were facing a different kind of mathematics, one where human lives figured into the equation. "What do you need from us?" Douglas asked finally. "Complete autonomy to implement necessary changes, no interference from the board on safety protocols, and a public commitment to maintaining these standards regardless of cost." "That's a lot to ask." "No," I corrected him. "That's the bare minimum required by law. What Harrison did, what you allowed him to do, wasn't just unethical. It was criminal." Douglas flinched at the word criminal, but nodded slowly. "You have our full support." The work began immediately. My first step was assembling a team of department heads who had helped expose Harrison's violations. Dr. Torres from surgery, Dr. Wu from emergency medicine, Maria Gonzalez from nursing, people who had risked their careers to document the truth. First priority, I announced in our initial meeting, is addressing the immediate safety risks. The compromised sterilization protocols, the maintenance backlogs, the staffing shortages in critical areas. Harrison's people are still in key positions, Dr. Wu pointed out. They won't make this easy. He was right. Despite Harrison's suspension, many of his loyal administrators remained, embedded throughout the hospital's bureaucracy. They had careers and reputations invested in maintaining the fiction that his policies had been legitimate. But I had something they didn't: proof. Over the next week, we methodically addressed each safety violation documented in my reports. The sterilization protocols were immediately restored to proper standards. Critical equipment maintenance was expedited. Staffing levels were increased to ensure proper safety monitoring. The costs mounted quickly, causing the board members to shift uncomfortably in their seats during daily briefings. But with the medical board's investigators now regularly present in the hospital, they couldn't object. The resistance from Harrison's remaining allies was subtle but persistent. Maintenance requests were lost. Schedule changes were misunderstood. Documentation was accidentally misfiled. Then came the first test of our restored protocols. Dr. Mitchell. Maria Gonzalez caught me as I was leaving a department meeting. "We've got a situation in War 4. The new safety protocols just prevented a major incident." I followed her to the surgical wing, where Dr. Torres was waiting with a grim expression. "The equipment check you reinstated," she explained. "It caught a critical fault in the anesthesia delivery system. Under Harrison's protocols, we wouldn't have found it until—" She didn't need to finish. "We all knew what could have happened. Document everything," I instructed. "Every detail, every person involved, every potential consequence that was avoided." The incident became our first success story. Concrete proof that the restored safety measures were saving lives. I made sure the report reached every board member and department head. But our opponents weren't finished. 2 days later, an anonymous letter circulated through the hospital, detailing the excessive costs of the new safety protocols and warning of potential layoffs and department closures. I called an all-staff meeting. Let's talk about costs. I began projecting financial data onto the screen, specifically the cost of a single wrongful death lawsuit, the cost of lost accreditation, the cost of destroying public trust in our hospital. The room was silent as I displayed the numbers. But more importantly, I continued, let's talk about the costs we can't calculate. The cost of a preventable death. The cost to a family who loses a loved one because we decided saving money was more important than saving lives. The anonymous letters stopped after that. 3 weeks into our reform efforts, I received an unexpected visit from James Chen, a patient who had survived one of the post-operative infections during Harrison's tenure. I read about what happened in the papers, he said, sitting carefully in my office, about the compromised protocols, the covered-up incidents. Mr. Chen, I'm so sorry for. He held up a hand. I'm not here to complain. I'm here to help. I'm a lawyer specializing in healthcare compliance, and I think my experience as a patient here gives me a unique perspective. By the end of our meeting, we had outlined a patient advocacy program, a direct channel for patients to report safety concerns without fear of being ignored or dismissed. The changes weren't easy, and they weren't quick. Every day brought new challenges, new resistance, new attempts to compromise or circumvent the safety protocols. But we had something Harrison never understood: the support of the people who actually did the work. Nurses, doctors, technicians, maintenance staff. They had all seen the consequences of compromised safety standards. They became our eyes and ears, reporting violations, suggesting improvements, maintaining the standards we'd fought to restore. 6 months after the medical board hearing, we received the official report on our progress. The hospital had not only met all requirements for maintaining accreditation, but had exceeded them in several areas. Patient safety metrics are above national averages, Catherine told me during her final inspection. Infection rates are down 60%. Equipment failure incidents have been virtually eliminated. And the costs? I asked, thinking of the board's initial resistance. She smiled. Actually decreased in the long run. Turns out preventing complications is cheaper than dealing with their consequences. Harrison's criminal trial began that winter. The evidence we gathered led to multiple charges of criminal negligence and fraud. As I testified about the systematic dismantling of safety protocols, I couldn't help but think about how differently things might have turned out if he'd succeeded in silencing me. 1 year after my termination, I stood in the same surgical wing where I first discovered the problems with the air handling system. The maintenance logs show regular checks, proper documentation, immediate response to any issues. Dr. Torres joined me on my rounds, now serving as both Chief of Surgery and Deputy Safety Director. Remember what Harrison used to say, she asked. Safety protocols are just bureaucratic obstacles. I nodded, checking the latest sterilization records. Now we know they're the foundation everything else is built on. The hospital had changed profoundly. Safety wasn't just a department or a set of protocols anymore. It was part of the culture, integrated into every decision, every procedure, every aspect of patient care. Harrison's efficient policies had saved the hospital $15 million over 6 months. Our safety protocols had saved something more valuable: trust. Trust from patients, from staff, from the community. Last week, I received a letter from a patient's family. Their mother had undergone high-risk surgery at Metropolitan General. The procedure had gone perfectly, with every safety protocol followed exactly as designed. We chose your hospital, they wrote, because we heard about your commitment to patient safety. Thank you for showing us what that really means. I pinned the letter to my office wall next to the termination notice Harrison had given me a year ago. Sometimes being too careful means being exactly what patients need. Metropolitan General became a model for other hospitals, proof that patient safety and financial stability aren't mutually exclusive. We developed training programs sharing our protocols and procedures with healthcare facilities across the country. The medical board used our case to strengthen safety regulations statewide, closing the loopholes Harrison had exploited. His trial led to new laws requiring greater transparency in hospital safety reporting. As for me, I still do my daily rounds, still check every protocol, still document everything. Some call it excessive caution. I call it doing my job. Because in healthcare, there's no such thing as being too careful when lives are at stake. Every safety check, every protocol, every documented incident is part of a system designed to protect the most vulnerable, patients who trust us with their lives. Harrison never understood that. He saw safety protocols as obstacles to efficiency, barriers to profit. What he didn't see was that they're actually the foundation of everything we do in healthcare. Without them, we're not just risking lawsuits or accreditation, we're risking the very thing we're sworn to protect: human life. Today, Metropolitan General stands as proof that doing the right thing isn't just morally correct, it's also good business. Our patient satisfaction scores are at record highs. Our complication rates are among the lowest in the state, and our costs, well, it turns out that preventing problems is a lot cheaper than dealing with their consequences. Sometimes I think about Harrison serving his sentence and probably still believing that I was just an obstacle to his vision of efficient healthcare. He never understood that true efficiency in healthcare isn't about cutting corners. It's about getting things right the first time, every time. Because in the end, the price of safety isn't measured in dollars and cents. It's measured in lives saved, complications prevented, and trust maintained. And that's a price worth paying every single time.